Hi everyone, this is Primetime Combat, and we are back again with another interview. This time with UFC Women's Featherweight and now dropping down to Bantamweight for this coming weekend's UFC event, Ramona Pascual. Ramona, thank you very much for joining me today. How's everything with you?
Thanks for having me. Things are going well. It's fight week, so just dying of anticipation now, ready to go, ready to get this weight cut done and have some fun on Saturday.
That sounds good. So, before we discuss your upcoming fight, I would really want to discuss your very interesting life so far. You were born in San Francisco but grew up in the vibrant city of Hong Kong and lived there for many years. What was growing up in Hong Kong like for yourself?
It was great. It was very international. I went to international schools, exposed to a lot of different cultures and opportunities. And I got into sports early on, and that was really sort of the vehicle that allowed me to come out of my shell and gain some confidence. And wasn't exactly anything that I thought that I would do full time. But now here we are.
And as I believe you joined the Hong Kong rugby setup, was that the first sport that you were involved in?
Basketball was actually the first one that I got involved in, and then a couple years later, this was in middle school. I think I was 14 when I uh, joined the rugby team, like with no experience. And I had no idea what to expect. It was just one of our friends was like, "Oh, we should all do it," and you kind of just do whatever your friends do. And it ended up being really fun. The contact aspect of it was something that really drew me to it. And it was, but I'd say that the biggest thing that I enjoyed out of it was just the whole group team atmosphere, and like I really loved the girls that I played with. I wouldn't say that I was really in love with the sport of rugby, but I liked it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed playing, and I liked it enough to keep going and sort of take it to later on the national level.
So, obviously, as time went, you ended up studying, I believe, business at the University of Southern California. And then at the age of 27, you decided that you wanted to change career and focus on MMA. For yourself, what was the switch in your head that made you think, I want to get into MMA? And what was the reaction like from your parents?
I've always been drawn to martial arts since a really young age, and it was sort of unfortunate that I wasn't able to start earlier than I did. But as I alluded to, I was really into sports. So then it was basketball, it was rugby, and in school that I was at, we had seasons. So you weren't just playing all year round, you just kind of had a few months. And then rugby would be in the fall, and then basketball in the spring. And then there was a sort of period of time in between where I wasn't involved in any sports because, the seasons weren't running. And that's when I got into kickboxing because it kind of started blowing up, more of that cardio workout style in like 2005. And so I was like 16, 15, 16, and I just really wanted to give it a go. And because it was like cardio workout, for fitness only, and I wasn't going to get punched or kicked in the face, my parents were like, okay, sure, go ahead and do it. And I just fell in love with it. And I would say, eventually I stopped playing basketball, and then eventually I stopped playing rugby, but martial arts was the one thing that I continued with all throughout my, 20s. And I just fell more and more in love with it as time went on. And it got to a point where it just made sense for me to start competing because I just been so obsessive with it and just entranced by the progress that I would make and all the techniques and just the world of combat sports. And so I would compete. I did some Muay Thai fights. I did some jiu-jitsu tournaments, and at around the same time, the UFC was adding had added to the women's division, and I was keeping up to date with those fights and being really inspired. And all the time, like because I had a business degree, I kind of had to work and do whatever else everyone else was doing. So you were either in sales or consulting or finance or real estate or some kind of management role. And I did that because I was expectations that people had of me, deep down knowing that I actually really wanted to give martial arts a go. But then just the thought of it at the time was like, there's no way I could do that. Like, no one's gonna make money being a professional athlete, let alone a fighter, there's minimal support for it. You don't make them anything at all in Hong Kong doing that. Um, but I just decided, I was 27 years old and I was like, I need to give this a go just for a couple of years and I can come back to whatever it is that I was doing, no problem. And those 2 years turned into 7 now, and it's kind of brought me all over the world and now in Vegas to, a point where I never thought that I would get to, but just constantly overcoming adversity and being just in love with the process and growing and being better at it and what I do has allowed me to make it here.
And then there's definitely been an incredible journey so far. So during the course of your professional MMA career so far, you have fought on a few different promotions, starting with the IMPI World Series in Hong Kong. You had your first 3 fights there. What was it like fighting in Hong Kong, a place where maybe combat sport is not very popular?
It was great. At the time, there was a lot of support for it. Before all the political and the COVID, situations came up. It was great because there was like 4 fights or 4 shows in a year, and they were really trying to put money into it. And the person that started it was a fighter himself, so it wasn't kind of this venture of like I'm trying to make money. It was really just to create opportunities for people to fight MMA in Hong Kong. And it was so I jumped at the opportunity to do that. But fighters aren't getting paid that much. Like the promotion is not making that much. So it was a really good effort to try to generate interest at the time. But unfortunately, that kind of came to a halt. But fighting home is always so special because I get to fight in front of my friends, and we get a really good crowd going there, and I fight sort of at the same venue over and over again. So everything kind of feels familiar. So it's definitely really awesome to be able to do that.
And after fighting in Hong Kong, you had taken much further steps in your career. You had fought on Road Fighting Championship in South Korea and also training occasionally in Phuket at Tiger Muay Thai and Phuket Top Team. You even had a Muay Thai fight at Bangla Stadium. What have the experiences training in Thailand been like for you?
It's great. I won my first 2 fights, and then I lost my next 2 fights, and then that kind of made me have to look at myself and sort of figure out what I can do better. And I think one of the main categories is really to leave home, and search for better training opportunities, search for better teams, better coaches, and not to take anything away from teams already in Hong Kong, but it's just everyone's quite segregated and there's like quite a lot of politics. And when you're in a densely populated city where rent is like super expensive, it's really difficult for people to get competitive, and so it's kind of like if you get all the MMA fighters in Hong Kong to train together, that would be great. But everyone's sort of part of different teams, different businesses, so that wasn't really ever going to happen. And finding competitive opportunities as well was another thing. So I left. I jumped at the opportunity to go to Korea because Road had offered me like some kind of training sponsorship where they kind of allowed me to train at their gym with their teams, and then sort of covered basic like transportation and food. And that was sort of my first time leaving home by myself in a foreign country where I didn't speak the language to pursue my passion. And then one thing led to another. So I fought there in Korea and I trained there for 6 months, and that was great. And then I went to Phuket, and sort of each time we could like kind of level up, trained at Top Team and did a bit of training at Tiger. And then I tried out for the program at the UFC PI in Shanghai, and I got into that. So then moved to Shanghai. And the reason I even considered moving to Vegas was because COVID had hit and there was nobody to fight really. And I felt fights kept falling through, events kept falling through, and the restrictions, travel restrictions, and all that. So yeah, I mean, I left home really to further my career, and it's kind of brought me to all these different places, and places that I've never imagined I'd be spending time in.
So if we talk about being in Shanghai at the UFC PI, after a grueling 2-day tryout, you were selected to be part of the program, and what led to almost 6 months of fantastic training. That said, it gave you a lot of confidence leading into your next bout. So if you could just explain what that experience was like training in Shanghai.
Yeah, I think the when I went and did that, that was kind of my first time. I didn't start MMA thinking I want to fight for the UFC. Like it wasn't really a goal that I thought was attainable. And then once I made it into the program, that's when things started. Now that dream was like sort of potentially a reality. And it was great because you're basically getting all of UFC's resources, not just their technology and the knowledge of all these coaches and nutritionists and physical therapy, and you get your board like paid for, your food, your treatment, all that stuff. And we were kind of like guinea pigs, sort of like a summer camp for fighters, but it's just all year round. We're kind of their guinea pigs, and we just follow everything that they give us. They've got clear cut plans for skill training, for S&C training, for nutrition, for physical therapy, and kind of learning so much about recovery, about um, periodization when it comes to fight camp, when it comes to trying to maximize strength and how to develop as an athlete. All these things that I didn't know before, that was more just guesswork when you don't know any better, right? So having access to all that information, the resources, was just so incredibly valuable, and I just soaked it up like a sponge. It was all just so fascinating to me. It wasn't just them telling me what to do. It was like I'm asking them like, why do we do this? And then they're happy to explain. And it was very much like a teaching opportunity for them, right? So it was a level of professionalism that I hadn't been exposed to in the sport prior to. And so being exposed to that also allowed me to bring that into, you know, my approach to the sport now that I'm here in Vegas, where I have more autonomy to pick and choose what it is that I'm doing rather than have someone give me a plan.
So you would definitely credit those 6 months to what built, the basics of a fight and the fundamentals definitely for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, each place I go to, it's sort of like, oh, this new thing where I like didn't know that this is a thing, like new concepts, new systems, new series, like different things from grappling and especially the grappling side of things, like MMA wrestling, because coming from Hong Kong, you have jiu-jitsu and you have Muay Thai. You don't really have, and wrestling is really a bridge that ties, the ground game and the stand-up game together. And then you have cage wrestling. That's a totally different thing. So that was my first sort of proper exposure to it. And so, yeah, it absolutely did give me a lot of confidence and expanded my game quite a bit.
So after that, you would then moved to Las Vegas to join Syndicate MMA under the tutelage of John Wood. Why was this move to Vegas so important for you and for your career?
It was the only it was the only guarantee for me to be able to be active in that year 2020, and also or that was 2021, also this year, because I always thought that I would stay in Asia for my career, just because I'm Asian. I represent Asian MMA, and I'm more connected to the market there. So then I thought, like, if I come to the US, then it's like the American market, and like I just get lost in the fray. And there's so many fighters out here. Uh, but ultimately, the plan was to come out to the US and fight once or twice. And then, within, I packed like two suitcases coming here, early 2021. And about a month in, I realized that this is where I'm most likely going to see out the rest of my career. I'm like looking to be here for years now. And it's been such an eye opener and such a pleasure to be able to work with a coach who's been a high level coach for so many years and has coached so many UFC fighters, and being able to train with UFC fighters and having so many different training partners and and weight divisions and styles and giving you different looks, and just being in the fight capital of the world, Vegas. It's like not just Syndicate, there are other gyms, there's the PI, access to all these people who have all this knowledge and experience has been incredible. And so it's like what you would get done in like 5 years working or training overseas. you could probably get like in a way shorter amount of time. Um, and all these people have already made mistakes at different stages, and so they've seen it all. There's nothing that I'm going through that they haven't seen. So it's kind of like being a small fish in a big pond, but in like a really positive way, where I'm never going to look at my experience and be like, oh man, this is so overwhelming. Like, I don't know anyone else who's gone through this. Like, I'm the only one and I'm like trailblazing. It's like, no, everyone freaking here does exactly the same thing. So there's a lot of comfort in that, knowing that whatever it is I'm going through, whether it's like getting over losses, injuries, you know, weight issues, like opportunities, it's everyone's been through it here.
So, your first fight with Syndicate MMA was a first round victory on Invicta Fighting Championships against Shamir Peshewa. And after that, on a week's notice, you finally got your call to make your debut in Las Vegas at the Apex. What was your initial feelings to this news?
I thought there was a very good chance, and I was confident that I would probably get a contract last year, but I thought it'd be the end of the year. Obviously you never know what's going to come up, but I figured like, oh, I fight this fight, maybe I do like one more, maybe two more, you know. Um, and so I fought that fight in Victa January of this year, and then I kind of was like, oh, I'm gonna take a bit of time off. Went to a friend's wedding in Hawaii, just really like you know laid low and just like took everything down like 10 notches, and then came back, was kind of getting into things. So it was like maybe 3-4 weeks right after that, maybe 3 weeks. And then my manager was like, I think I got something for you, UFC. I don't know if it's going to happen because it's a long shot, but we're going to see. And the next day he's like, you got it. Like, we're going to do this. And regardless of how prepared or not prepared I was, like, it was just going to happen. Like, if you have an opportunity, your foot in the door, you're just going to do it. And this girl that I fought, Josiane Nunes, actually, I think she had like two opponents fall through already. So then it kind of just worked out that I was local and able to take the fight.
So, do you think, especially not just in this instance, but also in over the last 2 years, being based in Vegas, as you say, the fight capital of the world, has really benefited fighters to sign with the UFC?
100%. Because so many fights at the Apex, so many people getting sick, getting injured, this and that, travel issues. So then who are they going to get to come out here? It's like the most low cost alternative. Get someone, who's already in Vegas, and they're two massive gyms that have loads of fighters that are ready to go, training all year round. So, it just makes sense.
So, after an unfortunate first fight in which you lost by decision, you faced Jocelyn Edwards in Singapore at UFC 275, a fight in which you once again lost by very close decision, although many members of the MMA community had you down to have won that fight. How have you reflected back on that fight, and what were your thoughts on how it went?
Yeah, it was a tough one because I had prepared and been ready for it, and like no excuses really, and it just wasn't enough. And I think part of the reason, well, there are a lot of things technically that I could have done better and athletically, and that I've addressed since then. But it was also like, what are the judges looking for? Like I always thought it was damage. So then I figured if I'm if you see two people walk out of a cage and one person's face is busted up and the other person's not, then you would say the person who's unscathed wins. That's what I thought, and that was not right. That was not true. And I didn't sort of fully understand the point fighting system where it's like they're looking for significant strikes, but significant strikes could be just a little tap on the leg and they are counted significant strikes. Um, and I was sort of trying to throw only if I knew that would land. And my shots, a lot of them landed. But the problem was I wasn't throwing volume. And I realized like, oh, that's kind of what they're looking for. And at the time it was like the Australian commission, um, and the Vegas commission is like quite different. And I don't know. The issue is like judging is quite subjective. So it's like, I don't know what you're looking for. Are you looking for damage or are you looking for volume? Are you looking for significant strikes? There are fights that I saw this last weekend that was like the judges gave it to the person who did more damage. But then in another situation, like, when you're looking at close fights, right, you could give it to the person who's just more active and who's just landing more shots, even though they're not actually affecting the other person at all. So that was one thing that I had to learn. It's like, yeah, every time I watch that fight, I'm like, it's so close. I think she definitely won that last round, but I was still so active trying to get the takedown, and you know, I thought I did enough to like drop her in the first round and all of that. But this and that, it is what it is, right? This is a sport. Things like that happen. I'm not going to go and say that they should overturn. So it was a close fight. If you thought that points were more important, then she won. If you thought damage was more important, then I won. But it happened to be those three people in the room who I had to convince were not convinced that damage was enough. So you get on with it.
Yeah, so if we move on to this weekend, you face UFC newcomer Tamires Vidal on Saturday night. How has training camp been and how are you feeling as we progress towards fight night?
Training camp has been brilliant. I've been able to draw from this entire year of training to get to where I am now. And we work on so many things specifically with John. Um, Things that I didn't do well, things that could be improved, things that we think we could capitalize on in certain, against certain opponents. So I feel incredibly confident. I've definitely evolved like in a big way this past year, and part of that is due to the fact that I've been active in competition. This will be my fourth fight in 9 months, which is awesome because I've always wanted to be active and I've always had issues trying to find fights in Asia. And the fact that I got 4 in 9 months is like incredible. And I hope to fight another 4 times in the next 9 months, and just be as active as possible, and get all that experience under my belt while I can. So yeah, I'm feeling really good in going into this. Um, and I think it's probably going to be my best one yet.
That sounds good. So this fight, we will see you drop down to bantamweight. This will be the first time since 2019 that you have fought this weight. Why did you feel it was necessary to drop down to bantamweight?
So that was a contract that I signed with the UFC to be in, actually. So the UFC is not actually, they're not looking for any 45ers. And they specifically make it clear that they're looking to add and grow their 35 division and not their 45 division. So it's sort of it's sort of a thing like if I want to fight for the UFC, I have to fight at 35. If I want to fight at 45, I got to go someplace else. So it kind of closes that door to 45. So we're here. I mean, it's a tough cut to 35. Like I would love if there's a 40 division, that's kind of the sweet spot for me. I'm kind of an in between 45, 35, but as it is, like I only got this one choice.
So if we look at your opponent Tamires Vidal, she makes a promotional debut this Saturday. How much have you seen of her and what do you make of her style and approach?
Yeah, she's got a very impressive record. She's only lost to like one person who's the top 5 in UFC right now. So I'm not going to take her lightly. She's got kind of a Muay Thai style. She's got good jiu-jitsu. And she's tough. All these girls are tough as nails. So we're going to see if technique can beat toughness on Saturday.
And do you think you match up well against her as you have the height and size advantage?
Yeah, I think so. I think she's going to come in. She's probably not going to cut a lot of weight. So she's going to have a lot of energy. She's got to have power. She's got a lot of power in those punches. But yeah, I'm definitely going to come in heavier than she and bigger. And I'm going to capitalize on that. I'm going to try to be active, try to throw volume, and then just see what she gives me.
And if we talk about where you're actually fighting, how much of a difference is there fighting in a normal cage in a stadium like your last fight, as opposed to fighting at the Apex in front of minimal fans?
Yeah, the Apex cage is smaller, but it does encourage more action, which is fine. And I live like 5 minutes away from there. So it just feels like home. Everything's familiar. Um, the crowd brings a lot of energy, and that's cool. But also, I don't mind the quiet, being able to hear my coaches and the sort of more intimate atmosphere and sort of get into your fight and get out. Um, it just makes it less of a big deal, I think.
And as we're concluding the chat, before we finish, I wanted to mention about your amazing TED Talk that you did about 4 years ago on the topic of fear. I will drop the link down below for you all to watch it. I very highly recommend it. Could you very briefly explain, Ramona, what your message was in that TED Talk?
Yeah, the message was to embrace fear because we all feel it. And to think that there is a state in which you have no fear actually makes it worse and perpetuates the fear. So, it goes with any insecurity that we have. You got to acknowledge its presence, and acknowledging its presence doesn't mean that it gives it power over you. If anything, it probably alleviates the pressure because you're kind of like, all right, I know that you're there, and I'm going to allow you to be there, but I'm going to control you, and I'm not going to let you control me.
Yeah, that's a very powerful message. So I really want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule to speak to me and share us your interesting stories from your career and thoughts on your upcoming fight. I wish you all the best, and myself in Hong Kong will be cheering you on this weekend. Thanks, Ramona.
Thank you.